Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidt List. I'm your host, Kurt Schmidt, and today's show is going to be very exciting because I've got my friend Garrick. We're going to be talking about all things pricing, and this is something that we've had lots of discussions about, but we've never recorded a show about it, and I'm excited that we're finally doing it. Before I jump in, I do have to make my quick little promo. The Solo Club is up and running. You can find it on LinkedIn. It's a private LinkedIn group for solopreneurs, independent business owners to come together and connect and be able to network with each other. So if you're not a member, if you're a solopreneur and or an independent business owner, hey, check it out. It's been fun. We're having a good time, and it's growing. So I'm excited about that. And last plug is for my new book, The 10-10-10. So if you want to check it out, it's on Amazon, and I'll have links in the description and all that stuff. All right, let's jump into our discussion with Garrick. Garrick, how are you today?
I am well today, Kurt. Delightful here.
I'm so excited that you are here. I'm so excited you are joining. So tell me a little bit about the work you're doing these days and who are you specifically working with?
I work with CEOs in B2B companies, software and professional services that are struggling with pricing. Where that came is I've done a lot of work in the past on value propositions, customer research, understanding what is interesting to somebody's customers, how to frame it, how to package it. And all of that gets condensed down into price. And price is so impactful, both as an interface to your customers, as well as a key to making a profitable business. So it's a fun lever to pull.
Yeah. And you've got a big history in the agency and service space too, as well, before you started down this path, right?
Yeah. And that's where a lot of this came from and was inspired by, whether it be my own work or the agencies and teams that I would work with. Always seemed to struggle here and never quite were able to price at a level that made a sustainable business on the professional services side. And whether that down to how do we get away from a billable hour, or how do we shift over to something like value pricing, or just how do we adjust our business model in a way that can minimize the feast and famine that is so often professional services. Yeah. And what I've seen recently is at a certain level with a certain kind of customer, the SaaS business model starts to look a lot like professional services just from the level of support that a vendor is providing their customer. Whether you've got a dedicated customer success person, whether you've got a dedicated account exec, it starts to look almost indistinguishable, even though it's a little bit more self-service, even though it's a little bit more hands-off at the core value proposition. All the things around it look a lot like professional services.
Makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a little bit about the history of what we've been dealing with here, because I remember 15 years ago, a book came out called Hourly Billing is Nuts. And I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, hourly billing is nuts. But you couldn't tell the agencies or the clients that hourly billing was nuts. Yeah. I mean, I literally just talked to an agency yesterday that I'm coaching, and they have a new client and they asked right away for their rate card. And this is still an industry where the tail wags the dog a bit. If the clients want a certain thing, it's really hard to push against what they're used to working with, especially as you get into bigger companies with procurement and things like that. They have rules and regulations. So tell me a little bit about your history with billing in general over the last few years, and how that's shaped and changed the way that you approach it these days.
Yeah. When I started my firm 20 years ago, originally, the convention was hourly billing. Yeah. And I quickly found out that I only had so much billable capacity as a one-man show. And that is even less than your billable capacity as an agency, because if you're a one man, you've got to do delivery and admin and new business. And those last two really eat away. And so by the time I hit 20 billable hours, I was exhausted. And I still had another half a week to go of just running the business. And I can't set my rate high enough to be able to accommodate this and to cover that other half a week. I gotta change that. And it was about 10 years ago that I shifted from hourly billing to I had annual retainers, I had monthly retainers, I had value-based project fees, and that really helped ease things out from a cash flow perspective, and also from how much time is it taking me to invoice? I really got annoyed with, I've got to record all these hours and build up this massive invoice. Whereas by the time I was at the tail end of that business, I was sending invoices once a year to clients. And that was amazing. And they actually thanked me for it.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. A lot less work on their end. But
yeah, that's what the surprise on my side was, oh, wait, I'm actually saving you effort as well. Let's keep going.
But if they have a machine built to handle that effort, like procurement in certain companies, they're not changing anytime soon because, their jobs are literally built into that process.
Yes. And I've been fortunate since restarting my practice that the places that I've worked with, we've been able to find ways around that because all different kinds of businesses need to be accommodated by a procurement system. And if you've got a good champion, they will find that thing on the procurement side that they can slot you into that is a win-win for both of them. And I've been really fortunate for that.
Yeah,
if you've got somebody who is locked in on a billable hour, it just makes it more weird, but you can work around that.
And so that's one tip that I want to talk about, because the one thing that I've been telling people is when you're working with your clients and you want to move to this thing, or you want to bring up how they're working with other vendors or outside folks, are all of those people billing by the hour? And you can go all the way down to the housekeeping service, like the people who clean up the place and things like that. How are they working with your organization? And while our work is going to be different, there is similar types of engagements where we need to show up at certain times and perform and deliver certain types of services. My first thing is usually inquiring into them. If they're asking for what the rate is and those sorts of things, I'm responding to their question with another question, like, how are you working? How are you working with other places right now?
Yeah. And to me, we haven't really dived deep into the problems with the billable hour, but the primary one that I have that I keep going back to in these conversations is it's hard to get the kind of impactful result that we're both expecting in that unit. And to some degree, it incentivizes the vendor to stretch that out and delay providing the result to the client until they get some certain volume of hours spent. And to me, that seems irresponsible.
Yeah, it is. And we all know, and it's a lie that we've danced around forever, because one person's hour is not the same as another person's hour.
Yeah.
It just isn't. So even
my Monday morning hour is different than my Friday afternoon hour.
Exactly. So even the concept of it, both sides know that it's a fabrication. But why is it part of our culture, Garrick? Like, why is this so ingrained in the way that we have to transact with other people?
I would say, I've got kids who are getting their first jobs right now.
Yeah.
And those first jobs are hourly jobs.
Yeah. Sure.
And some of them make sense as hourly jobs, right? Like one of the kids is handling dinner service for an assisted living place.
And that's the difference.
That makes sense.
Because they're required to be at a certain place at a certain time between a certain amount of time. So yes, absolutely, that makes sense.
But that's different than provide me a creative solution to a business problem I'm struggling with. And I don't know why clients. Oh, okay. So maybe this is the pressure. Maybe we're getting to this right now on this conversation.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. Maybe the pressure is on the client side to say, I actually want this result as quickly as possible. And against what you're telling me about how you do business, the way that I can ensure that is to put pressure against an hour. And I also want to provide the result as quickly as possible. And I have been delighted in those instances where, while I either was on a retainer or on a value-based fee, was able to get not as finished as a result as I was expecting to deliver, but it was substantial enough that the client was like, okay, got it. This is what I need to move on. I go, it doesn't need to be polished. Great. Let's keep going.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, because we tried to do this at agencies I was at in the past where we'd offer a fixed bid price versus a time and materials price. The client would always go with the time and materials because they thought they could get it cheaper. You'll just move faster and it'll come in under that thing. And I was like, have you ever worked with a lawyer before? Because again, we look at these parity sort of places like law practices and how they bill by the hour in a lot of cases, right? And there's a bit more standardization in those spaces, so they can get away with a lot. But I mean, how many times have we heard in the news about lawyers overcharging or something or whatever, some kind of discrepancy with those services because they're doing the same thing. They know it's all fudged numbers.
Yeah. And that at the end of the day, the outcome is worth something to their clients.
Yeah.
Good outcome
for sure.
and bad outcome are worth something different. And that billable hour sort of hedges it a little bit. But I know that there are, especially the high profile, some of those engagements are based on the outcome.
Yeah. But again, you look at how other service industries have transitioned over time, medical, for example, right? So if anybody's had, speaking of kids, if anybody's had a kid in the last 10 so years and you looked at your billing, these are services that cost this much. There's no breakdown of hours or anything like that. It's like the IV, this costs $700. And you could be like, why does it cost $700? And they're like, because it costs $700. That's what it costs.
That's a great example. You don't know. They're billing you $700 for that, but it's likely they billed somebody else $1,200 and somebody else $100.
Absolutely, yes. Yep. And there's no standardization other than there is what each hospital, and again, it goes different to each hospital too, or clinic, or whatever the case may be, because that's they bill according to what they need to make for profit.
Yeah, and there's a lot of don't have a lot of experience in the healthcare world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opacity in pricing in the healthcare world, and we as consumers of it don't have yet a great deal of levers to pull to be able to like. Whereas, by contrast, travel, airfare prices are constantly changing.
Yep.
You have lots of options to choose from. And they're increasingly make it more and more clear what is and isn't included. So I can make a decision on what is the most valuable things for me in this trip and how does that translate to how my price is changing against all of these options.
Yeah. Which, and airlines it's a terrible business. I mean, they make hardly any money. I think they make $7 a passenger in some cases. It's just incredible how much expense goes into maintaining such a large machine like an airline. Now, again, over the last 10, 15 years, us as service providers have, especially in knowledge-based industries, have had to deal with people coming in from other countries where they're undercutting the prices of what people are used to paying. And so there was this big surge of, we're going to take all of our stuff offshore and get things made overseas. We're going to follow Apple's model, right? Is everything, it's this fancy luxury item, all made in Vietnam or China or something. But it's this American pie sort of company, right? And here we are, I've seen in the last few years, a number of agencies pop up where it is just sort of, there's front men, and then all the teams are distributed all over in different parts of the world. And so the front men are just going out and selling the services, and then it's executed on in India, Belarus, or Brazil, or somewhere in South America. And they're still billing.
Thing.
Yeah, they're still billing by the hour. And so in today's world, like, what somebody comes to you and is, Garrick, like, I'm billing by the hour, and I'm up against this kind of these firms and these things. where do you start? What sort of questions do you want them to ask themselves as they are figuring out their pricing? What is the best questions that they should be asking?
At the end of the day, after all of these engagements have concluded, after the final invoice has been sent, total it all up and compare it against the other ones. If you land in about the same spot, you know what your price is for that scope of thing, and say, hey, we could go through all this whatever. But at the end of the day, you're going to pay X for this engagement.
Yep. It costs this much.
It costs this much. And also, there's what has really helped me is, and I know that a lot of businesses do this, especially when you get to larger agencies with multiple things. There's a floor there's a minimum engagement that if we don't get this engagement above that number, it's not going to be profitable for us. It's not going to be worth our while. And sometimes that number is unspoken and sometimes it's very clear. And so to me, that's the start is saying, take a look backwards facing at the engagements. What did you charge all in at the end? And how does that compare against some agency floor that you need to set to know whether or not it's worth your while to continue doing those kinds of engagements?
Yeah, that's an incredible thing, because we would do that at my last agency and determine which services are ones that we want to continue to invest in and which ones we don't want to continue to invest in. So things like maintenance, obviously, are always an hourly type of thing. And I've seen even more and more companies show up that are just maintenance companies. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because if your job is to do a lot of building, and maintaining is it's a different cadence, it's a different structure, it's a different model in many cases for maintaining software or advertising designs, things like that, or websites. It makes sense that you almost have to split the company into two different groups in order to be able to do it. When I was at a very, very large agency, I mean, we literally did. We had special groups that were just the maintenance groups, and projects would move over. They would move away from the people they've worked with for the last year or two on building the thing, and they'd have to move over to that team because that group was really good at building stuff, but their job is not to maintain it. So that's the other piece that I found, is that it's a cultural problem in a lot of these places, because they look at an hourly rate is something that's easy to hold the client accountable to, but if I fix it, I've got to hold my team accountable to that. And if I'm not a good leader, if I'm not a good people manager, and I recently was working with an agency on this, and I'm like, why are we always billing hourly? And then they couldn't really answer it other than their clients wanted it that way. But then as I dived in, I found out they didn't have any dedicated project managers, and could see very clearly that expectations were not set appropriately at the beginning of engagements. So it was way easier because there was not a lot of gates at the beginning where you have to gate a little bit more to fix the cost, and that they could just slide right in and move into an hourly rate, and they just bill. And so I find that culturally it's a stopgap for some of these organizations as well. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. It gives them a chance. Like, they don't really need to think about what they're doing, because they can
until they're doing it, right?
Until they're doing it, and then realize, oh my goodness, we're over our heads, and this is bigger, and they're more complicated. And what I think is worse there is often you're missing what the impactful result is that your client is going after when you just blindly build. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities and innovation and just delight in saying, okay, getting the team together and saying, we've got this opportunity with this client. Here's the result they're going for.
Yeah.
What does a 6-week engagement look like? What does a 12-week engagement look like? What does a 90-day engagement look like, to get to that same result and start to stretch and be creative, rather than just assuming that we can just send a website down the assembly line.
And I think the more niche you are, the easier it is to do this as well.
Yes.
Because back to your point about, if I've got more repeatable processes, I know a woman that runs a fantastic web design company that all they do is work with HVAC places. So they have basically got a product that they can stand up for people very quickly, because it's not a lot different than the others in terms of functionality, right? It's book a time, get an appointment, pricing, frequently asked questions, all that stuff. And they can churn these things out pretty quickly and spend more time on the creative and the messaging and the stuff to make them stand out versus some fancy like mapping feature or different things like that. And they can move them through the pipeline quicker, and they can fix the cost of these things and move them out. But as you and I both know, there's a difference between building your lifestyle business and building a business, because I know so many creative people that would look at that and turn up their nose and be like, I want to create great things in the world, Garrick. I want to invent the next whichever. But I feel like if you're in a transactional services-based model, like you got to tamper your expectations a little bit when it comes to building a profitable business. Because again, like I know lots of lifestyle agencies, like they're just a few people and they just build stuff and that's it. They're fine. They don't need any more than that. And that's great. I think it's great.
Yeah. And that is the vast majority of businesses in the US.
Sure. Yeah.
I've got a stats someplace in one of my For Starters newsletter. I actually went through the stats, and it's something like 82% of all businesses in the US have fewer than 8 employees.
Yeah. Fewer. They make less than $1 million a year. Yeah. Yep. I've seen that stat before.
Now, do you want to get above that? Do you have ambitions to be more profitable or make something that is more substantial than that? That might even be a saleable asset. We're going to have to take a look at that. We have got different approaches to that. And I do a lot of work with early stage founders as well. And any of them go towards, I'm going to need to raise funding. And like maybe at some point, but you're going to have a lot easier time raising funding if you have a business here that is profitable, that has demand, that has predictable revenue, that you can draw a box around and say, this is the thing.
Right. It's like I bought some raw land on the North Shore a while ago, and I realized I can't get a mortgage because there's nothing on there to mortgage. And so
not an asset yet.
Yeah. So to your point, I want you to give me money, but what am I actually investing in if it's not something that already exists in a profitable idea? And I get it. You watch all the Shark Tanks and all these different things. And yes, I totally agree. Bet on the jockey, not on the horse, right? I think that's a smart move. If if there's a great team, they will figure something out. But that means something's already been figured out to prove that they are that good of a team, right? Not just an idea, because ideas are cheap.
These are cheap. And I mean, you've, I'm sure, been on projects with a very enthusiastic founder.
Absolutely.
Slightly bigger, fatter wallet than they deserve for this idea. And they decided to burn
I got
it all.
I got it in my head. I know exactly the one.
Yeah. And they were like, you know what? We're going to burn it all on building a product.
Because we're going to change the world.
Haven't done customer development on.
Yep. We're going to change the world. But I haven't talked to one single potential customer or buyer about this. I had a guy once, this is great, reached out, wanted to build something, but wouldn't talk about it over the phone because he was concerned that whatever NDA and all this stuff. I was like, that's fine. I'll sign an NDA or whatever. And we came and met with him, and he proceeded just to tell us about an idea that already existed in the world. It's pretty common, actually. And we were like, he's like, I didn't search Google because I didn't want them to steal my idea. And I was like, okay. Nice. Okay.
I had a call.
I wish you the best of luck
with the founder. I had a call yesterday with the founder who was similarly as hesitant to talk. And then when I got into it, I'm like, oh, the reason I was confused about who you were is because you are now telling me the same value proposition that 3 people earlier this week did.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you're solving a problem that's already been solved.
And you haven't done customer development.
Yep.
When I say, hey, do you have 10 people that could be your buyers right now? And you say, no. I'm like, okay, let's take the rest of this time and flush that out. So you've got some tangible direction to develop this idea. And then call me back and we can talk about who you talk to and how significant a problem they said they were having. And then we can start to get to, is it worth you actually pursuing this? Because you've got these people who say they could use this kind of help, and that kind of help is worth this to them.
Yeah. And that's why I've encouraged people I've worked with and agencies that I'm working with. I mean, read Clayton Christensen, read Jobs to be Done, and have an understanding of why people are buying your services. They are trying to solve a business problem. They're not trying to buy a website. They don't want to buy a website. That's the last thing they want to buy, but they have to, because it has to solve a business problem for them. And if you can speak to how you solve those business problems, your value goes way up versus your hourly rate. And once we had made that change at my last agency of talking and leading with the business problems we're going to solve and the impact that doing this work is going to have with their businesses, and how we've seen it change other businesses and then led with that, and then tail end was the actual execution part, changed the whole conversations. It changed the profitability of the organization. Everything changed. So back to my point about this cultural aspect to pricing.
Yeah.
It's so hard when you're not confident in your business or skills. I mean, you feel confident. You feel like, oh, I can knock out any logo anytime, no big deal. But all of a sudden you've got a person in a business suit sitting across from you questioning your value, and a lot of people will shrink from
that. Absolutely. I see that so often in the creative world. And a lot of my work with founders is sometimes just helping them unblock that internal confidence. And part of that unblocking is sitting in or what I've been calling customer rediscovery. I will talk to all your previous customers to understand all of the amazing value that you provided them that was unpriced, that you just naturally provided, that was outside of the scope of work, which is why they're repeating clients, but nobody says it's explicitly this, or this. Oh, your responsiveness is so amazing, better than anybody we've worked for before. That's why we do business with you.
Yeah.
Or, right, you speak more clearly, or whatever that attribute is, to dust that off, to discover that, to show that back to my clients and say, here are all of the things that people are enjoying when they're engaged with you. And you can dial that up or down against price, but or you can unbundle it and say, oh, only the special people will get that price, will get that offering. And I now know that explicitly, that is part of my value, and I can choose to offer it or not.
Yeah. And that's what's key, is that I love that idea of unbundling what those aspects that you might have been providing these services without actually pricing them correctly. And if you unbundle them a little bit, you can start to see, oh, I am providing a good amount of value here. And I think it goes back to then the cultural aspect of, no, actually we're a real business and things like that. I mean, I remember being at agencies, we'd have 100 people and be like, something would happen and we'd be like, we're like a real business. And we're like a real business. We have 100.
We're like a real business.
It's like we have 100 people on the payroll. Of course.
Shared fiction for all of us in this room right now.
I know, exactly. But again, people assume that people have it all figured out and everybody's just winging it as we go. But what I found during the pricing discussions was that it is a solid matter of confidence. It's a statement of confidence too. And I've had so many clients where they're like, you're more expensive than these guys are. And I was like, yep. And
we are.
Yep. Yes, we are. I mean, we are. And one reason I can point to is that in the last 7 years of business, we haven't lost one single client. And so the people that pay for our services get value out of our services, and that's it. And so if I couldn't point back to that stat, and I was just like, again, if you don't stand for something, you just stand for nothing. And so many of these people don't stand for a lot other than I want to make some money by doing stuff. And I think that trickles into every little aspect of the choices you make as a business owner, how you price things, how you manage employees, the type of people you hire, the type of clients you attract.
Yeah. And the more I dig into this, the more it is clear to me that your pricing strategy is your business strategy, and it just flows from there. And wherever you put yourself, premium or commodity by the hour or value or whatever, the rest of your business is led by that. And if you're not continually revisiting all of that, is this pricing strategy working? Is it getting the kind of clients and engagements that we want?
Yeah.
Is our internal operations and delivery shaping up the way we want? Sometimes just changing the pricing model can have these amazing rippling effects that I have seen it can create calm where there was frazzledness, can create clarity where there was chaos, and create simplification where there was complexity.
Yeah. I think transparency plays into it too. I used to say in a salary negotiation, they always say the first one that puts out a number loses, right? But to me, in a scope or a services, the first one that puts out a number wins. Is that the faster I can give you an idea of what this might cost, the sooner I stop wasting anybody's time. And what I find interesting is that still so many agencies are so scared of sharing potential costs for their services because what if they're too expensive? And it's like, what if? Maybe. And I can't tell you how many times I've been coaching agency owners and like that was a bullet dodged because they would have been a terrible client over the long term.
Yeah, the measure that I use is when the number was stated, did the prospect blink and still say yes? And if they said yes and didn't blink, you've got a lot of headroom.
Yeah,
you can keep raising it.
Yeah.
If they blinked and said no, you're too high for them, and you can decide whether or not you want to keep going or not.
You can decide whether or not you want to keep pursuing it. And what I also find funny too is over the years is how agencies keep their rates secret, and especially from each other, right? Because there's a scarcity mindset of if somebody knows what my rate is, somebody else could just charge $5 less and win the business. And my answer was always like, if they can do that, good for them. Because I probably don't want to work with that client that chose them.
That's what so many founders I talk to are going after a problem space and saying, we can compete on price. And I said, good God, don't do that.
No.
Because while that might, like the current offerings might seem more than you want to pay or more than the customer wants to pay right now, you will immediately find out why that price exists once you go to market. There's some barrier that's not obvious to you that as soon as you open your doors, you'd be like, oh, and this is why prices are what
right. Yeah. Especially in regulated industries and other things too. It's so common. I mean, I can't tell you how many in the course of my 25 plus years of doing agency work where I've had somebody show up with something that's going to compete against the MLS for real estate. But the real MLS is a monopoly and you can't, I mean, there's just, unless the government steps in, you can't outwit and outsmart the MLS. It's just the way it is. And there's certain parts of areas where people thought we can outdo this stuff, right? So Uber blitzscaled taxis out of existence, right? Which was just a weird thing. And Airbnb blitzscaled with renting out rooms and things. But then you've seen it tried over and over again with other things. They're like, oh, that worked with cars, let's do it with scooters. And it's not that great of a business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's going to be interesting in the business history books to see if they shake out how much those two entities are a result of really, really, really cheap money.
Yeah.
And I think part of the shift in my practice over to pricing is a belief that the era of cheap money is over. And that comfortable, profitable, sustainable business models is a future. And I think we got a lot of work to get more businesses sustainable and profitable and confident in a world where just doing another raise is no longer an easy option.
No, and if you're utilizing outside services to build those companies or other things, you can't just go the cheapest route anymore because it's too risky for your business. Whereas before you could fudge it a bit because if we have to build it twice, we still got time.
Yeah.
But these days, no, you're not going to get away with it. Plus, investors are much more savvy these days than they used to be back in the .com bubble and things like that. They were like, "Oh, I hear this is good, so let's invest in this." But we still see it. Again, you have to. I think number one, if you're a service provider, you're out there, you're doing agency work, and you're pricing your things. You start by talking to your clients and your potential clients. Are you getting value for your money?
Yeah.
And to your point, that's super scary for lots of people to ask their clients these things, because what if I get an answer I don't want to hear?
That is the kind of work that I absolutely love doing. I am happy to go to your clients, your best clients, your worst clients, your new clients, your old clients, and have that conversation with them, whether or not you're in next to me. And to me, it would be great if my client was next to me in those conversations, but for them to do that and be able to have get the value out of it, they need to have a really strong relationship and be really comfortable getting punched in the gut a lot. So sometimes it's easier if I just do that alone and then come back to them, be the intermediary. But we will always get new kinds of value, new kinds of insights, new kinds of opportunities to shift the value offering of that agency and that service.
Yeah. And that's something I would do at a lot of my agencies in the past, is have an outside third party come in to talk to the clients, because they didn't want to be honest with us in the first place. Not that they were trying to hide something necessarily, but it's, if you worked with the team for a year, you don't want to say anything bad about the team. What if it gets back to them and you like that person and you saw pictures of their new dog and stuff on Slack, and like, you don't want to, but if you bring in a disinterested third party and have them do you're going to get a lot better results, and you'll get them a lot quicker as well. So I think that's a key. I think that's a key unlock for anybody listening to this episode is yes, survey your clients, ask them what they like and value. But if you want the real story, bring somebody in to help you with it. I think you're going to find a lot more value with it.
Absolutely. And you could just, your offerings could be off just by 10 degrees.
Yep.
But sometimes that's a really tough 10 degrees to shift because of all the internal cultural things we talked about. And the other value about the disinterested third party is any kinds of those personality things so often get dissolved into a larger pattern that is not about the person, but about communication, expectations, all of those kinds of things.
All the soft stuff.
All the soft stuff that you can then go back to and say, okay, this is actually the pattern. It presents in these ways. So when we see these things, we know it's gone sideways. How do we get it on the right track and keep it on the right track?
Yeah. And if you're getting pushback and you're in the delivery side of things, I've run into this before, where sales is, we own the customer. Don't talk to the customers. Don't ask them about their experiences and stuff. Make sure you're challenging them. Then when are you going to talk to the customers? Because we need this data. We need this information to know how things are performing, if they're performing at the right speed, if we're providing value, and if that cost is effective, right? We can't just go with anecdotal, yep, I'm good, or we need.
And I think this is where a good pricing strategy comes in. And also one of the innovations on the SaaS side of the house that I think also helps this is the introduction, the notion of a customer success manager or lead, someone whose job it is to ensure that the customer is maximizing their usage of the service, of the software in a way that is valuable. And maybe in the agency world, this is like an account exec or something like that.
Sure.
But the idea is there's somebody in addition to the salesperson who is looking at that relationship through a different lens. And therefore, it becomes less about an individual and more about a cross-functional view of that relationship and the win-win direction it needs to be moved against the pricing strategy.
I think it's super smart, and I've implemented that in success before, and I'll tell you, and this is the same advice I give a lot of the agencies I'm coaching. The one interesting thing you'll find when you start implementing that, whether it's a dedicated role or somebody in the business takes on that title for part-time of maybe they're an HR person and they're spreading out, they want some more opportunities in the company. On the profitability side, maybe it's other overhead you have and you want to get them to engage with the customers more. Wherever this comes from, you will find that your customers do not know the full extent of what you offer. And it will blow your mind how little they know about what your business offers. And it's such an opportunity to re-educate them on that you provide these additional services. Because I guarantee you, 80% of the people I talk to, if I ask them, do you know that this customer also does these things? They're like, oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, because they engaged to make progress on a specific job, going back to jobs behind Clayton Christensen, and they're making progress on that, and they're good with that.
Yep. Yeah, and they don't look at you in any other way. Yeah. They don't. I always use the Tires Plus example, right? I go to Tires Plus and to get tires. But even though there's a sign out front that says like we do brakes and stuff, I wouldn't Tires Plus would not be the first place I would think of when it comes to brakes, no matter how much they're advertising it to me. But if they had somebody, a representative, and they had a program that was there to educate their customers on the full breadth of what they did, it's great. A lot of places don't put that kind of effort in.
And where do we, and then it becomes a rollout strategy or marketing strategy about where do we put that communication? How do we do that bundling? What's the hit we're comfortable taking to get that word out? Just becomes delightful conversations that I could keep going on. Even in that hypothetical example. I
know. And we have to stop here, but with this, we'll just call this part 1, Garrick, and we'll come back and continue our conversation. I'm excited to hear if people's opinions, if you've got opinions, make sure you share them in comments, shoot me a message. Make sure you connect with Garrick. He's very active on LinkedIn. He posts some great stuff over there. If I want to find out more about working with you or follow you and listen to your ideas, Garrick, where can I get more info?
LinkedIn is good. I have a Substack called For Starters, all the things that early stage founders put off until it's too late. We talk about pricing on there. We talk about value proposition. We talk about customer research, all the things founders put off until it's too late. And also through consulting.com, you can learn more about my pricing practice.
That's awesome. And I will have links in the description below for everybody. If you want to check it out, I highly recommend it. Garrick has been an icon at least around my town for a long time in the agency business. So you're going to learn a lot if you follow him. Garrick, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Kurt. Thanks so much.
All right.
Talk soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us. One quick plug, the Solo Club is up and running. It's on LinkedIn, so make sure you go and check it out. And like I mentioned, go and check out all the links below. You're gonna really get a kick out of if you're in this space. Garrick, you're gonna learn a lot just from following him, so make sure you do. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.